doing the Lord's work. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Commonwealth for another episode of Larks, Lamentations. Today we're going to look at the lawful good guys of Massachusetts, the Minutemen. So strap on that Pip-Boy and crank up your laser musket as we dive into the Sandbox faction in Fallout 4. So, I'm assuming, though, that the majority of you watching this know the backdrop behind Fallout 4, so I'm not going to explain it in great detail. Nuclear war, out of the frying pan, into the icebox, technocrat, shoot your spouse, and take your disappointment. A strong response is sure to follow. So let's discuss the Minutemen and their history. The Minutemen are a militia of citizens of the Commonwealth who work together to protect each other from the numerous threats in the wasteland. We do not know exactly when they were formed, but we know they rose to prominence around 2180, when they repelled a super mutant attack on Diamond City. And for the next 50 years, the Minutemen would be a strong military and political force in the Commonwealth. But things started to go downhill around 2230, when the Minutemen tried to form the Commonwealth Provisional Government. Basically, the Commonwealth Provisional Government was an attempt to form a somewhat of a democratic or republican level of government where all the major settlements would send representatives and try and vote on common issues. One of the people that came to this was the Institute. Now, the Institute, for whatever reason, got miffed at how the meetings were going and decided to, kill everybody. Because apparently when the Institute says mankind redefined, what they actually mean is, if I don't get what I want, I will kill everything.
What do you mean you don't agree with me? Do you know who you're dealing with?
Not great at diplomacy, those technocrats. After the collapse of the CPG, the Minutemen went back to protecting the land undeterred. So what if there's no government we have to answer to? We will continue to protect the common man. Protecting that, what's that? Oh shit, that's a giant Mirelurk right there.
What I heard was that some kind of monster came out of the sea and destroyed the fort. A lot of the leaders were killed in that battle, and I guess nobody ever felt it was worth the risk to try to retake it.
So here's this giant enemy crab.
Yeah, so in 2240, a Mirelurk queen and the massive army of crabs attacked the Minutemen's headquarters at Fort Independence. This was the loss of their main base, but it also meant the loss of their radio tower, meaning they could no longer easily communicate with each other. Because of this, they entered into a period of steady decline. And for the next 40 years, things aren't going to get any easier for them. By the time 2282 rolls around, one of the last heads of the Minutemen dies in General Becker. Now, the general is the head of the Minutemen, and after his death, traditionally the colonels would get together and try and decide who should succeed him. But after Becker's death, no one could decide or agree on who would be the next general. So because of that, the Minutemen started to fracture. The Minutemen would still, try and answer calls and help people, but with less and less effectiveness. Eventually, most of the Minutemen cells would disband, some in a little bit more flamboyant ways than others. For example, one Minutemen unit led by Gabriel would actually become a raider gang based out of Libertalia. But this isn't an isolated incident. Another good example of a Minuteman turning into an asshole would be the Quincy Massacre. Ironically, one of the last real incidents of the Minutemen pre-start of the game. See, in 2287, the people of Quincy called for aid as the gunners were planning to attack. They wanted to use the place as an outpost, and, the settlers were kind of getting in the way. The settlers, not wanting to leave and give up their home, called for help. Colonel Ezra Hollis's company answered the call, but it was clear that Hollis's small company was completely outgunned and outnumbered by the gunners. It wouldn't be long if there actually was a battle. So the colonel decided to do what you might do and expect in this situation, call for reinforcements. A radio call was sent out for any and all Minutemen to come and aid in the struggle against the gunners. But none came. There were no Minutemen left. They were the last group.
I was with Colonel Hollis's group. A mercenary group called the Gunners was attacking Quincy. The people there called for the Minutemen to help. We were the only ones that came. The other groups, they just turned their backs on us and the folks in Quincy. Only a few of us got out alive. Colonel Hollis was dead, so I ended up in charge of the survivors.
In a cruel twist of fate, though, one Minuteman did respond, or should I say former Minuteman. A treacherous little asshole named Clint defected from the Minutemen to join the Gunners. Colonel Hollis was at first delighted to see Clint, believing that finally the reinforcements had arrived, only for Clint to issue demands for Colonel Hollis's surrender. Hollis, being a Minuteman through and through, refused. And the battle that followed can only be described as a massacre. What Minutemen and civilians weren't killed, routed, and escaped with Preston Garvey. Preston led his men to try and establish a settlement in Jamaica Plains, but there were too many ghouls to make it a viable settlement. With that a bust, Preston tried to move to Concord, but he was attacked by raiders and holed up in a museum. The resulting fight left what was left of Colonel Ezra Hollis' company whittled down till it was just Preston, the last Minuteman left in existence, alone with 4 civilians who still depended on him, with him praying for a miracle or an honorable death.
It was the lowest point of my life. I mean, all my closest friends were dead. Everything I believed in had turned out to be a lie. I'd failed everyone who ever relied on me. I'd led them to Concord, and we had no hope of getting out alive. The thing is, that was actually okay with me. I was ready to die. It was what I felt I deserved. It was what I wanted.
A short but sad history. An organization built on the idea that it is everyone's duty and responsibility to protect and care for one another, chewed up and spat out by an uncaring wasteland. But that doesn't need to be where their story ends. Perhaps you could write a new chapter for the Minutemen. But should you even bother? Let's look into it. Let's analyze the pros and cons of the Minutemen, shall we? Pros first. Let's start on a goods note. See, the Minutemen truly are your faction. If you decide to help out Preston, you will become the general almost immediately. Yes, there's one or two missions, but it's super quick, trust me.
I think you're the one who can bring the Minutemen back and bring the whole Commonwealth together.
Okay, I'll do it.
Good. Good. Welcome aboard. I feel like this is a whole new start for the Minutemen and the Commonwealth too. Don't worry, I'll be right beside you all the way, General.
Anyway, you got your own faction right out of the gate. Booyah. Plus, they give you your first energy weapon and the laser musket and your first set of power armor. It also comes with a minigun, so what's not to like? Everything's going up great. Oh, and did I mention you also have a flare gun to call for reinforcements? Isn't that pretty good? Nothing feels better than leading a squad of Minutemen to take down the horrors of the wasteland. Not to mention, if that's not good enough for you, as you progress later into the game, once you hit the mid-game, you have access to artillery. And I believe it was Napoleon that said God favors the side with the best artillery. Plus, you also got Preston. He's a pretty solid companion. Yes, I know he can be annoying with the amount of quests he gives you, but you just want to make sure the Commonwealth's okay and give you all that sweet XP. So, again, also, if you bring Preston along with you, he's much more tolerable because he actually helps you fight. And he's pretty good in a firefight. I really like the guy. Now, there's another benefit to it. The Minutemen, totally chill. They're not going to start looking around going, are you seeing other factions? No. They get it. They understand. They understand that you like to move around a little bit, experiment. They're cool with that. You want to chill with the Brotherhood? That's all right. Just let us know when you want some artillery fire. You want to be the Institute? All right, science experiments are cool. Let us know if you need to hunt down a Deathclaw or something. The Railroad? Kind of heretical. Will still work for you, but we're going to be pinching our noses whenever we go by the main base. No offense. Actually, you know what? Yes, offense meant. Now, moving on from there, we need to talk about the con. What do you expect? The faction was whittled down to one guy at the beginning of the game. They're going to have some strings attached to them. So, like I said, they start with one guy. You build them from literally nothing, which means you have to build them from literally nothing. If you want the Minutemen to be effective, you have to put the time, energy, and caps to make them possible to be an effective fighting force. And that is very time-consuming, very tiring, and often can be kind of tedious and draining. Let's get into it. So, see, here's the thing. Preston and Radio Freedom are always going to have something for you to do. Sometimes multiple things to do at once. which is irritating, particularly as the game starts progressing on and you have other quests that you'd rather be doing. Also, those perks come with... Also, the perks that I mentioned previously with the Minutemen do in fact have catches. The flare gun that you can use to call Minutemen to your help realistically only works if there are Minutemen close by to you, meaning early game, it's worthless. Later game, it's... might work. Flip a coin, honestly. Realistically, unless you just do nothing but build Minutemen settlements, odds are you're probably not going to see the Minutemen ever if you use the flare gun. It's just not really that great.
Oh, No, it's fine. It's fine. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me. It bothers me. It bothers me a lot.
The artillery's a little bit better, though, because you have a little bit more control over it. But again, you have to be the one to build all the artillery encampments. The artillery guns have a limited range in which they can fire, so the best way to use them is to make sure every settlement you own has one. But that also means that you have to make sure someone is standing and equip them, and you also have to make sure you have the materials to build them. It can be time-consuming. Now, this can be fixed with mods, but still, it's something that has to be fixed with mods. Regardless, though, there is nothing more upsetting and more disheartening than hearing the guy say, sorry, you're out of our artillery range. Yeah, and another problem is, true, the Minutemen are a neutral faction. You don't immediately piss anybody off unless you intentionally piss people off. But the con is, you really don't do anything all that exciting. The Minutemen are cool when they retake the castle or they defend the castle, but that's kind of it. I mean, the nonsense like Bunker Hill, nothing goes, like, Minutemen are not, you don't even get an option to alert the Minutemen and let them know. But that's gameplay, though. That could be sort of an oversight. Bethesda, you know how they like to goof. Let's look at the thing lore-wise and logically. The Minutemen aren't exactly professional soldiers. They never really claim to be. They're militia, and their gear does reflect that. They come to battle with whatever they can get their hands on. Typically pipe guns, hunting rifles, shotgun, and the odd laser must get thrown in for some variety. They don't have the nicest toys.
I gotta get one of those.
And for some minor threats, like small raiding groups, animal attacks, pack of ferals, they're not going to do poorly. They'll 9 times out of 10 do what you need them to do. But if heavy resistance comes, like gunners, super mutants, or heaven forbid you ticked off the Brotherhood of Steel, or an army of synths, you're probably not going to be doing as hot. Heaven help you if a Deathclaw shows up. See, there's something I want to address about the Minutemen along with all this, and it's where the Minutemen got their name. The original Minutemen are based off of the New England militia, specifically the Minutemen companies. See, Minutemen and militia are not necessarily the same thing. Put it this way, all Minutemen are militia, but not all militia are Minutemen. See, back in the days of colonial America, every able-bodied man, around 16 and above, was required to serve in the militia, with the exception of Pennsylvania because, well, Quakers. The Minutemen, though, were a little different. They were set aside from the normal militia. They were meant to be sort of super militia, but not quite regular soldiers. They would have more training, i.e. they drilled more than normal militia and actually got paid. When I say they got drilled more, normal militia typically would drill maybe once or twice a month, whereas Minutemen would drill 3 to 4 times a month. Thing is, they did a little better, got paid and all that jazz, and they were expected to respond at a minute's notice. In fact, if you were a Minuteman and you didn't have your rifle close at your side at any point in time, you could be actually caught in a little bit of trouble. Regardless, though, most people in the United States have heard of the Minutemen. Most people growing up in a U.S. school would be able to tell you about the Minutemen's involvement in the Battle of Lexington and Concord. But I'm willing to bet that most of you, even those that have studied the American Revolution a decent bit, would have trouble identifying any other battle they took part of where they stood out from normal militia. This is because they weren't the end-all to be-all that we sometimes like to think they are. After the Battle of Lexington and Concord, Continental Congress toyed around with the idea of creating minute companies all over the United States, but quickly dismissed as they could barely afford to pay for the Continental Army, let alone multiple of units that were slightly better than normal militia. This isn't to say that the Minutemen were worthless or that they didn't do anything. They absolutely did. And they were around for much longer than just the American Revolution. They were a part of the New England culture for a decent amount of time, and they were part of several military conflicts. But the Minutemen's job was to respond quickly to threats and either take care of the threat quickly or wait until the rest of or hold them there until the rest of the militia could come up and actually help reinforce them. After the Battle of Lexington and Concord, most of the Minutemen and militia got folded into a standing army to besiege Boston. And so Minutemen really don't appear as Minutemen, per se, in the rest of the American conflict. But that goes in the back thing. Why didn't we have minute companies afterwards? Well, we toyed around with the idea after the American Revolution because there was a bit of a myth that the American Revolution was won largely by militia. And while militia did help, we can't understate the efforts of the Continental Army and professional soldiers. Militia have a lot of problems. And that can especially be seen when we tried to use the same tactic and strategy in the War of 1812. When we realize militia being forced to fight outside of their homes and for goals they don't necessarily agree with can lead to a lot of problems. Look into our invasions into Canada. Regardless, though, let's go back and let's try and connect the Minutemen to their Fallout 4 counterparts. See, they share a lot of the same problems. For example, defending their homesteads and settlements, the Minutemen do just fine. But anything beyond that, they're going to struggle, and they know this. This is why they stay out of the larger factions' way unless ordered to or provoked. It's no sweat off my back if a Brotherhood knight wants to go try and find some tech in the back room. And if the synths want to try and come over and look for some beryllium agimegator, why do I care? And if the railroad want to sneak around a bunch of weird synth people underground, none of my business. I'm more concerned in making sure there's food on my table and the raiders don't get in my larder. That's more of what the Minutemen are about. And it's not a bad thing. It's just they're not geared up to become the leaders of the Commonwealth. And even if you do make the Minutemen the leaders of the Commonwealth under your leadership, that's going to be a problem once you pass away or you decide to leave office. If the Minutemen are to take on the responsibility of not just protecting but governing the Commonwealth, you're going to have to issue several reforms in your time as the Minutemen. But it's not impossible. Let's discuss what things are going to need to happen. First and foremost, you're going to need to form a government of some kind, the CPG, definitely. In order for this to happen, you're either going to need to wipe out the Institute or take over the Institute. Regardless, we're going to assume that this is end-game scenario and you have already taken care of the problem. But let's be real. It's been 200 years since the bombs have dropped, guys. We're kind of lagging behind in the rebuilding process. I mean, for Pete's sake, California is laughing at us.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
I mean, an upstart with a bunch of Roman LARPers is making us look bad. Seriously, guys, we gotta be doing a little bit better. Anyway, we need to start creating government. Democratic, Republic, something along those lines. Gotta keep with the Minutemen vibe. That being said, though, there are some benefits to having some form of limited government. With the government, they will now be answerable to more than just whoever's general at the time. Plus, having a civilian government will help in figuring out who should take over after the current general leaves office. It will also help in another aspect: money. It is never officially addressed how the Minutemen are paid. In all likelihood, they aren't, and what supplies they have are provided by either themselves or donated by grateful settlers. But these aren't for the individual Minutemen. These donations are for the cause as a whole. And while this is good in the short term, it needs to be improved, particularly as the Minutemen's ranks start to swell. Remember, the Minutemen are not a standing army. Every member of the militia will eventually need to put down their laser muskets and pick up a plow if they want to survive. Remember, they have themselves to feed and probably families. However, if the Minutemen troops start to receive pay, they can start to form a more permanent standing army of professional soldiers. It also means that increased funding can be used to provide better supplies and equipment. I mean, for Pete's sake, Raiders often have better gear than the Minutemen unless you're running mods, which I do. Then the Minutemen start to look more effective and can start focusing on cleaning up Boston and actually rebuilding instead of chilling in the baseball stadium, believing it's the height of fancy living. I'm also tired of the only one who ever does construction work around here. I am trying to find my disappointment, kill wasteland evildoers, and avenge my wife, not necessarily in that order. You can plant your own damn crops. I'm a general, not a farmer. Sorry. Speaking of doing it by yourself, it may be a good idea to ally with some other people. For example, the Brotherhood.
Did we just become best friends?
Yep!
Considering their superior firepower, you could ally with them and have them deal with most major issues in the Commonwealth, while the Minutemen deal with minor issues. Super mutants in town? Call the Brotherhood. Raider gang? Get the Minutemen. In return, the Minutemen would turn over potentially dangerous tech to the Brotherhood scribes, and their settlements would provide food and shelter for Brotherhood soldiers in the area. Brotherhood would get multiple safe harbors out of this deal, and potential recruiting pool as exceptional Minutemen could be scouted and added to the ranks of the Brotherhood. But if you don't like the Brotherhood, you could just ignore this option or kill them. But why would you do that, though? I mean, come on. But you know what? I'm not going to tell you how to run your Minutemen. You do you, guys. And speaking of which, you could, if you wanted to, also take over the Institute. As I said previously, the Minutemen have no issue if you decide to ally with the Institute. So, let your disappointment of a son die, reform the Institute, and use their technology to help fund and arm the Minutemen in place of a Commonwealth government. It's a little bit more nefarious and pulling from the strings, but it does bring order and stability. Well, it does kind of feel hollow, but, you know, this is your general, you get to decide what to do. But with those ideas being said, we have... Wait, what about the railroad? Well, you see, can't you ally with them? I mean, you can, but it makes more sense to ignore them. What do you mean? Okay, literally, if you blow up the Institute and Minutemen run through the railroad, if they help or not, thank you profusely. It's really funny if you don't use their help, because they thank you so much for, oh, you did all this good for Synth-Kind and everything, even though that wasn't the goal entirely.
Well, if it isn't the General of the Minutemen, the Destroyer of the Institute, Liberator of the Synths, my only regret is we couldn't have been there when you did it.
I didn't do it for you.
I don't care why you did it. You're a damned hero in my book. We got the synths out of the Institute.
Literally, all of their main goals are accomplished as an afterthought in the Minutemen run-through, which really draws home how pointless they are, and why the Minutemen should have been one of the three main factions, and not the Railroad. I'm not bitter, you're bitter. Sorry. Now, regardless of the disappointment of the faction choices Bethesda makes, even with these reform ideas, we have to address the possibility that they could all fail. Here's the thing, making a new government is never easy. Just look at the American Revolution and how that almost failed on numerous occasions, and you can look at the French Revolution and notice how that did fail on numerous occasions. Making new governments are rough, and there's no guarantee it will be stable. And there's no guarantee that any alliance you make will actually last or be beneficial. The Minutemen have broken treaties before, the Institute has broken treaties before, and the Railroad are too incompetent to understand how to even work a treaty. So, there is every possibility that despite your best efforts, the Minutemen won't really last in the long run. Compared to the Institute or the Brotherhood, you might start wondering if all this extra effort is even worth it. After all, you can ignore the Minutemen quest if you want to. You can just tune out Preston Garvey. They're only a big player if you make them one. Otherwise, they're almost completely left out of the main story. Like I said. When things start getting heated at Bunker Hill, does the game say, hey, go talk to Preston and get the Minutemen to go stop him? No. It says, go talk to Elder Maxon, go talk to the Railroad, or go help out the Institute. Minutemen aren't even thought about. So if the game doesn't expect you to think about them, why bother? Why suffer the grind and all this building projects and trying to protect and create every single settlement in the Commonwealth for little to no thanks? If it could lead to nothing or maybe even worse once you're gone, why on earth would you even try? Why waste the energy? Because maybe it isn't a waste. Because despite it all, the Minutemen are perhaps the most worthy of your support. As many have pointed out, the Minutemen are what you make them. But there's more to it than just creating your own organization. The Minutemen are more than just an army, a militia. They are an embodiment of the best parts of the American spirit. The perseverance for man to be free, and in that pursuit to help others achieve the same thing. Though the Minutemen are perhaps the most challenging and time-consuming, they are the most noble. The Brotherhood Knight, powerful as he is, will kill the mutant, because it is an abomination. But the Minutemen, as weak as he may be, will struggle to kill it because it is a danger to innocence. The Institute will effortlessly establish a settlement for a mere experiment to be thrown away. The Minutemen will break their backs to build a settlement because there are those that are in need of a safe place to call home. The Railroad Heavy will expend all of its resources to defend one measly settlement to protect a seventh. But the Minutemen cares not who is in the settlement, for he views all of them as worthy of his protection. For at the end of the day, all other factions talk a good game, with lofty ideals and grand goals, mankind redefined, ad victoriam, stopping slavery. But in the pursuit of their grandeur, the enlightened factions have forgotten the simple things. You don't need power armor, ballistic weave, or any other fancy technology to help people. Help can come in many forms, from fending off ferals from his neighbor's home, to building a farm so his friends can have a place to stay and something to eat. You see, America was built off of many ideals: freedom, opportunity, and hope. In the ashes of post-war America, only one faction of the wasteland actually desires to give all three to its people. So, join the faction of hope. For when the people required shelter, we answered the call. For when the people had hungry mouths, we answered the call. And for when the people cried for a savior to banish the evils of the Commonwealth, we answered the call. Human ghoul or synth, we will still answer the call. For hope is not found in technology alone. It is found in men and women willing to sacrifice themselves for the people they call neighbor. So, General, you have been called. Will you answer it? Thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. This has been Larks, Lamentations. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.